We wanted to address just a few things. We've gotten several calls about the status of the matter involving the 2-year-old child that was died of a gunshot wound over in the West Blount area. This afternoon, Blount County Sheriff's investigator Ed Hull secured warrants against Evelin Etress. Those warrants being for aggravated child abuse, reckless manslaughter. Additionally, he's in the process of obtaining unlawful possession of a controlled substance, unlawful possession of marijuana second, and paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia charges as well. So a total of 5 charges at this time against the mother of the 2-year-old child. Before we talk about the facts, let me just say that, I believe very deeply in the Second Amendment. I believe in the right of law-abiding citizens to own their firearms, protect their homes, and defend their families. In fact, my husband and I, we have a lot of firearms in our home. We also have 2 small children, one being 4 and one being 6. And because of that, we have taken all steps necessary to ensure our firearms are secured and our children cannot access them. We believe in being able to protect our family, and we believe just as strongly in the responsibility to protect our children. We don't leave knives laying out in our home so our children can grab them. We don't leave prescription medication out, and we don't let our children go play near the highway and expect them to understand that knives are dangerous, prescription drugs are dangerous, and that the highway is dangerous. They're children. A firearm is not a toy, and it's not a teaching moment for a toddler. And in this case, as we see, that teaching moment came too late. It's not something that our young children's brain can understand or respect, and it can't leave firearms unsecured and expect our young children to know the difference. Their brains are developing, and they're too young to understand the difference between a toy and a deadly weapon. When a gun's left out, a child doesn't see danger. They see something familiar. If you think about it, our children play with water guns and with Nerf guns and things of that nature, and these young children just don't know. And as a result, a misunderstanding can turn into tragedy in seconds. And these charges are not about politics. It's not about government mandates. It's about responsibility and valuing lives that God's placed in our care. Locking up your firearm and keeping your firearm, a loaded firearm, away from your child doesn't weaken our rights to bear arms. And it doesn't take anything away from you as a gun owner. It shows that you take your role as a parent and a protector seriously. And we do have a duty to keep our firearms secure and away from our children, especially when they're loaded and we have young children in the home. As you can see, in January, or just Wednesday, Sheriff's Office responded to the call of a 2-year-old child who had a gunshot wound to the head. When they arrived, they learned that there were actually 6 children in the home. A set of 4-year-old girls, an 8-year-old girl, a 9-year-old girl, and a 13-year-old boy. Also present in the home was the mother. The mother had left the children playing in the master bedroom, and this is all part of a public record that you have been provided and was filed by the Blount County Sheriff's Office, when she heard a loud noise coming from the master bedroom. And when she went in there, she observed a handgun laying in the closet floor, and there were 3 children that had been in that closet. That gun was a .380 Smith & Wesson, .380 caliber Smith & Wesson. Crime scene investigators determined that the projectile had gone through the 2-year-old's skull, through the wall, hit the roof, or hit the ceiling, and then landed on the couch. The investigator determined that that firearm was owned by Evelin Etress and that she had left it unsecured and loaded in the bedroom. Upon obtaining a search warrant, the Sheriff's Office located a total of additionally 6 firearms. 4 of those firearms were within reach of the children and were loaded. Ammunition was also found in that home. In addition to, when they arrived, there was a strong smell of marijuana, and they located marijuana, mushrooms, and paraphernalia. We've had that firearm traced, and it does belong to the mother in this case. So those are the charges at this time. If you have questions about the father, at this time, those charges have not been filed, and I would not be able to update you right now. This has been a long and grueling investigation to determine a lot of specific facts about what's going on in that house, and our investigation is ongoing.
Are you able to share if the children are still in DHR custody?
I don't want to talk about the DHR aspect. That would not be something I would ask you to refer those questions to DHR.
You say that there aren't charges against the father. Does that mean he is in custody right now?
There are not at this time any charges.
There are not.
And I'm not aware of him being in our custody.
In regards to the father, in Allen Court, he has been convicted previously of a robbery, a felony. Is there a reason that he has not been charged with felony?
So, if you didn't hear, the reporter asked that a public record review would show you that the father in this matter was convicted of a robbery third, I think in 2010. And a convicted felon under Alabama law of a violent crime, which in this case would have been a robbery, would not supposed to be in possession of a firearm. During the course of our investigation, which is why it's taken us several times, we reached out to the Board of Pardons and Parole and learned that he had been granted a pardon and given his gun rights back just a little over a year ago. So he did have the right to have those firearms, but that was a decision made by our Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles, which then allowed him to have firearms back in the home. And let me say, as with any press conference we have, all people are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law, and they will have their right to a trial which is allowed under our Constitution, and they have the right to be presumed innocent until such time as the state proves their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt or they enter a plea of guilty.
Has any of the investigations shown if the gunshot wound was accidentally self-inflicted or by another child?
So we believe that it was not self-inflicted.
At this point, do you believe it was inflicted by one of the other children?
We believe it was not self-inflicted.
Have you talked with the mother at all? What is her emotional state right now?
So it would be improper for me to discuss with you whether or not we have had any discussions with the mother under Alabama Rules of Professional Conduct that prosecutors are required to abide by.
So I know the day of the shooting, the sheriff's office said that they believed it was accidental. Is that, whether it was self-inflicted or not, is it still believed to be accidental?
I don't think there is any intent that the 2-year-old would die, regardless of who picked up the gun and pulled the trigger. I don't believe that, and I think you maybe can read between the lines in my statement. We have to, as parents, as gun owning, protecting parents, take steps to prevent our children from believing a gun might potentially be a toy and pointing it at other children in our home. And that's just a responsibility as parents. We can't leave loaded firearms within reach of our young children and expect them to understand the difference when we're still literally changing their diapers and ensuring that they are fed and bathed and clothed and taken to school, and we provide all of their necessities.
What is the next step here when there are court appearances?
So it's my understanding a bond has been given by the magistrate. And just so people know, and I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding of the DA charged, or Pamela Casey's after so-and-so, or this DA's after so-and-so. Just to understand the process, under Alabama law and criminal procedure, a officer would have to prepare an affidavit, submit that affidavit and deposition to an independent magistrate. It's not somebody who works for our office. It's not somebody who works for the sheriff's office. The magistrate makes that independent decision of whether or not there's probable cause for charges to be filed. There could have been a situation where the magistrate looked at the facts in this case and said there wasn't, but they did. And that was submitted, and a bond was given, just as it is allowed under Alabama law, except for those cases that are outlined under Anaya's law. And so it's my understanding at this time a $90,000 bond has been issued, and I'm not aware whether or not she's made that bond.
Are you able to tell us any kind of timeline on when charges may be expected?
I apologize. I think you may have asked me about what comes next, and I kind of got off, so let me go back to that. So with any criminal procedure, once an arrest is made, they'll have a first or initial appearance in front of the judge, and they'll get to make the opportunity to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty if they choose not guilty. If they don't have an attorney, one will be appointed for them. They'll then have what's a preliminary hearing to make a probable cause determination in district court. Should the grand jury meet before then and the case be ready, it could always go to grand jury prior. Once it goes to grand jury, the whole case will go to grand jury, that against the mother and also potentially against the father. And again, I say potentially because at this time, the father has not been charged with any crimes under Alabama law.
Do we need a safe and secure law?
I don't want to get into talking about that right now, just because this is a tragedy. It's a straight up tragedy what happened. These actions forever changed a family, changed children, and we see the loss of a precious soul. That shouldn't have happened. We need parents to put their guns up if they're loaded and they've got toddlers, period. And that's what my husband, we have a safe. We have the ability to access them if we need them without them being in the safe. There are methods that we can be gun-loving, gun-bearing, Second Amendment strongholds and still protect these little babies that we've been given. And that's what I would encourage parents tonight, is just to evaluate, where are my firearms? Are they accessible to the children? You know, even do children know you don't play around? We always, you know, we were taught growing up. I mean, I'm a rural girl in the country. You treat all guns like they are loaded. Now, how hard is it to teach our children, put your shoes on, go brush your teeth, do you need to go potty? And yet we can't teach a child, a 2, a 3, and 4-year-old, to treat a gun like it's loaded, because their brains aren't developed. In fact, children's brains don't develop. Your brain's not fully developed until you're in your early 20s. I mean, that's why we sometimes say teenagers make really crazy decisions and have hard times making decisions. So to expect a small child to be able to understand, that's why we as parents, again, do we leave knives laying out? Do we take the children down to the highway and let them just run around and play? We'd be appalled if we saw that. We'd be appalled if we knew that people were leaving knives laying all over their home. And so, you know, I just strongly encourage parents to just, you know, take a moment tonight, evaluate what you have, where is it, and make sure your children, you want to be able to ask, hey, look, we want to protect our home. I want to protect my family. My husband wants to be able to protect my family in the middle of the night if something goes on. But we can do that, and we can keep our rights and also protect our children.
The sheriff had stated there were other guns in the home. Were they also registered to the mother? Or?
We are still working through those traces on that. That's why I said our investigation's ongoing.
I know you didn't necessarily want to speak to Reggie's question about the law, but with the pardon, do you think that there may need to be stricter guidelines for how it's agreed?
I have been for probably 10 or 15 years a vocal, I've been outspoken about actions that some of our times our Board of Pardons and Parole has taken. I just have a really hard time with someone who has a violent crime. There are different types of pardons. So you can get a pardon and not get your gun rights back. And so I think if it's a violent crime, we need to evaluate how we give those gun rights back. I am not against people rehabilitating making amends, doing what they're supposed to, and getting a pardon, depending on what type of crime it was, depending on what happened, depending on the facts of the matter. But in this case, or let me just say, I would not be a proponent of violent offenders getting a pardon that involved getting their gun rights back. Thank you all so much. Hope you'll have a great weekend. It's going to get rainy. I hope you don't wash away in the flood of 2026.